Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are watching this video. Today we're going to talk about communism and how it actually is fascist. So as we all know, communism is, of course, an ideology, political and economic ideology, whose goal is the creation of a communist society. Now, of course, I'm using just the basic search here. I've already created a video which you can go ahead and go look on for a little more of a, not necessarily a deep dive, but a shallow dive. We come over here again using just a basic search. Fascism, a system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator. Communism, as we know, aims to have socioeconomic order centered on the common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange that allocates production on society based on need. And the basic goal that everybody who aims for the communist society is that the workers control all their own means of production, which, funny enough, is exactly what capitalists do anyway. We trade our labor for wages, which also includes the benefits that we get. We used to not also get benefits either. That was something that was created as an incentive to get people to come to different jobs. Healthcare was not always provided. That's not here. That wasn't in Scandinavia. Most countries didn't give you healthcare. But regardless, communism seeks to have everyone on an equal footing. Now, that being said, that's impossible because you still have to have people in government, people running things. There will always be the elites, somebody above somebody else. And the United States system of government aims to keep that more equal than most other systems. There's a reason why we have civil service. You were originally supposed to do your civil service and then leave. There's a reason why career politicians are not supposed to be a thing, but that's a video for another time. Today, however, I'm going to explain why communism is actually fascist. So again, fascism is a system of government marked by centralization of authority. Now, communism can only be achieved by force, because otherwise, how would you get people who don't want communism to contribute? Well, you force them. Well, how do you force them? By the barrel of a gun. Because if you don't, people don't want to cooperate in this system, it doesn't work. In capitalism, people contribute because they see that even with nothing, they can eventually rise to something. There's a reason why there are so many stories of people getting rich coming from almost nothing. In communism, that doesn't happen. You are generally born into either the elites, the haves, or you are born into the peasantry, the have-nots. The Soviet Union, Communist China are great examples. Now, generally when people think fascism, they think Nazi Germany. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the system of government. A lot of people try and say that you cannot have the two together, and I believe that that's a lie. And the reason why is because, one, communism specifically is an ideology. Fascism is a system of government. Therefore, they can exist together. In my other video, I described how fascism states here it is far right, and the history of it is actually incorrect. This is the true definition of fascism. Far right is what's been attributed in recent years. Actual fascism simply means that it is, right here, marked by the centralization of authority under a dictator. Now, it states here a capitalist economy subject to stringent government controls. You might say, well, that wouldn't work under communism because the commune, everyone, would own the means of production. That wouldn't happen. The government would still control the economy. The Soviet Union controlled the economy, and currently China stringently controls the economy. You can take a deep dive for yourself, and there are other videos out there. Look at government controlled entities such as Tencent. We should know that company by now. Tencent follows very, very stringent Chinese government rules. Otherwise, they would not be allowed to exist. Sounds exactly like fascism. China also violently suppresses its opposition. We don't hear about it often, but they do. The Soviet Union, of course, we know all about their violent suppression to opposition. We also know exactly what they did with the farmers who didn't want to give up their grain. Again, I'm not going to go into that deep dive. Might be for another video. You can look that one up yourself. And of course, fascism says typically a policy of belligerent nationalism and racism. This is a key thing here. Typically. Now, you also have to get into what nationalism is, what racism is. However, fascism doesn't have to have racism specifically. That really only applies when you have homogeneity within a country. The biggest example, of course, is going to be Nazi Germany, where you had all the German people. But the main point of this is the belligerent nationalism. Now, if we go over here, again, this is just a quick search. This is communism versus fascism. Both ideologies. Oh, no, it's not. Now both are an ideology, not just communism. Both emerged in early 20th century Europe, but have fundamentally different principles regarding individual rights and the role of the state. So we go down to the key characteristics here. The philosophy of communism advocates for a classless society and communal ownership of property. Fascism emphasizes extreme nationalism and the supremacy of the state. Except that applies to communism as well, because extreme nationalism is not mutually exclusive to a classless society nor communal ownership of property. The supremacy of the state, the exact same thing. You can still have the classless society and communal ownership of property and still believe in the supremacy of your state. The political system of communism, again, aims for the stateless society. Interesting. I'm not sure what a stateless society has to do with the community owning all the means of production, because a stateless society would mean no government, and yet you still require government to run everything. See, having a stateless society makes no sense, even if the community owns all the means of production, because one is economic, while the other one is governmental. Fascism, however, its political system, centralized autocracy led by a dictatorial leader. Once again, I emphasize you cannot get to communism without having that centralized autocracy, because you cannot get everyone to agree on communism except through force. The social structure of communism seeks to eliminate class distinctions and promote equality. Fascism supports rigid class roles and hierarchy. Nowhere in fascism's definition did it ever state that. And what class roles would that be? Communism also would have to have some sort of class role as well, or some sort of hierarchy. So that's a bit of a misnomer stating that this has class roles and hierarchy, whereas communism would not. You would still have to have some kind of government body. Somebody's going to have to be higher than somebody else, even if temporarily. And then you get into, of course, how temporarily? 6 months, a year, 2 years? Economic focus. The economic focus of communism focuses on the economic equality and distribution based on need. Who decides the need? As one of the fundamental problems with communism. Who decides on the need? Because if it's the government who decides on the need, I'm not sure how much you're actually going to get. Take a look right now at all of these stories that you hear from people in Canada, the UK, some of the Scandinavian countries. They claim that their government health care, they're waiting 6 months for certain things, cancer treatments, 6 months, 3 months, 3 years. Some of their ER visits, of course, are 13 hours. And that's just, you can do a Google search on that one. The average ER length in Canada, I believe it is 12 to 13 hours for non-critical. Fascism's economic focus prioritizes national strength and militarism, often aligned with business interests. Business interests according to who? Well, if the government is in charge, much like it would be with communism, then it's, of course, according to the government. Therefore, the government is still in charge of determining what goes on in both systems. Now, of course, you have down here historical context, implementation. Communism was notably implemented in the Soviet Union under leaders like Lenin and Stalin, aiming for a global communist state. As we know, the Soviet Union has collapsed. It didn't work. Fascism, prominently practiced in Italy under Mussolini and in Germany under Hitler, marked by aggressive nationalism and militarism. Historically, of course, these were also during times of rising war, not giving any excuses, but there you have it. However, the Soviet Union was not under a time of war when communism was implemented. In fact, it was during revolution, so they were under a civil war. The factions declared war on themselves. The conclusion that this search draws is while both arose in response to social and economic issues, they represent opposing views on governance, society, and the roles of the individual. Communism seeks equality and communal ownership, whereas fascism prioritizes national strength and hierarchy. Once again, I say that these are not mutually exclusive, specifically when everyone is equally shit to the government. It doesn't matter. Communal ownership is also going to be impossible, especially when the government owns everything anyway. Fascism, you can still have national strength and hierarchy even within communism. And the biggest example we have today is going to be China. I mentioned it earlier. China has tight control over its own government and its own economics. I give you the example of Tencent. There are many other companies, of course, that have to rigidly stand by China's economic policies, or they will be destroyed by the government. That sounds exactly like capitalist economy subject to stringent government controls. However, everybody says they are communists. And for now, that's all I'm going to say about that. If you've made it through this short little video and you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and give me a like, subscribe. There'll be more coming in the future on this and other topics.